Hello everybody, Jedi Warlock here and welcome back to another video here on the channel. Today we are returning to the world of Azeroth for episode 4 of the WoW Rocks series, where I examine some of the most geologically interesting areas in World of Warcraft. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at Azshara, a zone in World of Warcraft Classic with one of the oldest histories present in the game, as well as some of the game's most distinctive geologic features. I'll be covering the geology of this serene zone, and I've also decided to include a short history section due to the region's heavy ties into the War of the Ancients lore. So, with all of that being said, let's get right into it and explore the world of Warcraft. Azshara is one of the less traveled corners of Kalimdor, a quiet, autumn coastline that reaches out to form a magnificent bay filled to the brim with marble ruins and the occasional coral formation. While the nearby coastal forests and the region's latitude may indicate a more temperate climate, pink sand on Earth is usually restricted to more tropical shores, such as those in Bermuda, Barbados, and the Philippines. This unusual color of beach is created from the washed-up shells of single-celled organisms called foraminifera that live in the nearby waters. When these organisms die, their shells fall to the seafloor and can mix into the sand and stones that later wash up on the beach. It is likely a similar phenomenon has occurred on the beaches of Azshara, with very specific environmental conditions leading to the distinctive sand here. Just make sure not to take any, or else the earth giants might get upset. With regard to the coral of this region, the formations can mostly be found in tide pools around the region, but you can also find some out on the edges of the bay. The tide pools here also bring up a really interesting question that took me a while to figure out, but now I think is pretty cool. On the coastlines, especially on the edges of the bay, there are many tide pools teeming with coral and aquatic plants. However, there are also a select few tide pools that are a substantial distance away from the shore, and are a lot higher up too. When I was first investigating this area, I thought that there was no way the shore could reach all the way up into some of these shattered canyons, even with things like high tide and spring tide happening every so often. But then I realized, Azeroth doesn't just have one moon, it has two. The White Lady and the Blue Child, as they're called, both orbit the planet, which in my mind could cause some pretty extreme tidal changes if those two were to align in the sky at certain times of the month or year and cause some sort of mega tide. We don't know much about how quickly these moons orbit Azeroth, and frankly for this theory, I can't really extrapolate it to all the other zones in the game, which would be problematic. But the way Azshara's tidal landscape appears in-game seems to indicate there is something else going on in addition to the normal tides. While there is an event known in the game lore as the Embrace, with the Mother Moon and the Child aligning perfectly once every 430 years, it is unrealistic to expect these super tide pools to exist in WoW only because of a very rare event happening in-game. I think a more reasonable explanation is that there are some other periodic lunar patterns that affect the tide, maybe even one that only affects northern Kalimdor, and could explain why Azshara seems to have an abnormally high change in tides. While this diagram is virtually all conjecture regarding the orbits of the two moons, it illustrates my general idea. Perhaps the two orbitals of the moons overlap closely in the Great Sea off the coast of Azshara, which every so often could lead to both moons pulling the tides in an exponential way. Also, I really like this visual because it illustrates how the convergence zone actually sits right above the Maelstrom and the ruined empire of the Night Elves, who revere the moons as celestial beings. Even if we don't know exactly what causes the super tide pools in Azshara, I think they, along with the rest of the detailed coastline, are a crucial element of this classic WoW zone. Before we cover the history of this region, let's go ahead and explore some of the notable areas on the map. The visual centerpiece of this massive zone, the Bay of Storms, dominates the middle of Azshara, a watery graveyard of sunken ruins and lost treasures. Hydras, sea giants, and other creatures of the deep inhabit the ruins and small islands, but the real sense of awe comes from the sheer number of ruined structures here, with dozens of towers, pavilions, and pillars protruding from the bay or hidden underwater entirely. The Temple of Archeron can be found here along the northeast shoreline, but a number of smaller domes and temples can also be seen in the area. While not inside the Bay of Storms, the largest collection of ancient Kaldorei buildings can be found at the ruins of Eldorath, which sit just east of the shore. Once a thriving city not too far from the now sunken capital of Zin-Ajari, Eldorath was ravaged during the Sundering and is now a shell of its former self, with Naga prowling the ruins looking for lost relics. Speaking of lost relics, one of the biggest pieces of lost content in WoW's history is the unused battleground Azshara Crater. While never implemented into the game, the Forlorn Ridge, in the southwest part of the zone, still has empty entrances for both the Horde and Alliance on either side of a massive mountain, which can be interpreted as the walls of the crater itself. Special thanks to Wowmaster for getting a look inside, as this secret area reveals an expansive set of ruins and 2 gigantic dragon statues. While this aesthetic was likely chosen specifically for the PvP zone design, I couldn't help but think that, if canon, the crater could have been a secret Night Elf city or sacred site, where they would have communed with the dragon aspects before the Kaldorei Empire crumbled. As a final note, the Forlorn Ridge mountain doesn't really fit in geologically with the rest of the zone, and my thought is that it was either caused by a meteor impact, or maybe an isolated lava hotspot thousands of years before Night Elf society began. While the people of Azeroth are familiar with the threat of the Burning Legion, the Night Elves were the first to experience a demonic invasion. 10,000 years before Classic WoW, the Burning Legion arrived on Azeroth, drawn to the magical font of energy created by the Night Elves, known as the Well of Eternity. During this time, the Night Elves controlled the vast majority of Old Azeroth, including the area where Azshara lies today. Eldorath, once a bustling city in the heart of this land, was enchanted with a blessing of eternal autumn. I find this to be fitting, since Kalimdor, home of the Night Elves, is sometimes referred to as the Land of Eternal Starlight, which stands in contrast to the High Elf Kingdom of Quel'Thalas, the Land of Eternal Spring. At the end of the War of the Ancients, the Well of Eternity imploded, causing the Great Sundering that reshaped the world forever. During the Sundering, half of Eldorath, along with much of the original Azerothian landmass, sunk below the rushing sea. While much of the Night Elf Empire was lost, the red and brown hues of the trees remain today, a remnant of the once great power of the Night Elves. Walking around this zone, exploring the beaches, the lost temples, and the tide pools really embody the idea of a forgotten realm, far removed from the grandeur it once possessed. Azshara is one of my favorite zones in Classic WoW, and while it might not be the best questing zone, its unique atmosphere, landforms, and significance in the lore all make it a great example of what a WoW zone should be, and I hope you'll see this area in a new light next time you travel there. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning about the geology and history of Azshara today. If you did enjoy it, make sure to like the video, comment down below with your thoughts, subscribe to join the Jedi Order, and until next time, peace.